We soon enter Yizkor, a service of remembrance. We carry mostly warm memories, but sometimes painful ones with us at this time of year, and even into this sanctuary as we ask God to remember our loved ones for good and for peace. We certainly don't need to be told to remember, or do we? We are here, aren't we? What more could we possibly need to remember? I am a facing history-trained Shoah educator. I have served 2 congregations with large numbers of Shoah survivors, and my family itself has lost over 300 members during the Holocaust. I recently read an article which recalled to me stories I have heard from survivors throughout my life. In this article, a Holocaust survivor remembered a recurring incident. Repeatedly, the survivor remembered that when a fellow inmate of the camps knew he was about to die, he would clutch this survivor's hand and plead, "Don't forget me." Those simple words, seeing them again, moved me. First, the dying prisoners assumed that someone would survive and that these survivors could and would tell their stories. The account is a clear expression of hope in the darkness. But those simple words also tell us much, much more. And their message is truly not only for the victims of the Nazis, but for all of our loved ones who have left us. What does it mean to say, "Don't forget me"? Don't forget that I existed. Don't wipe away all memory of me. My having been here has to have made some difference. Don't forget me. Don't forget that you are here because of me. I gave you life. My love sustained you in dark times. You know how to love because of me. Don't forget me. Some things are inevitable. I suffered. I endured pain. I harbored doubts. I grieved. And I had triumphs and achievements to cheer. All you are feeling, I once felt. You learned how to respond to life from me. Don't forget me. Don't forget what I tried to teach you. Don't forget what I stood for, what I cared about. My making a difference in this world was not just in building buildings or in writing books. It is knowing that you are keeping alive what I cared about. Don't forget me. Don't forget that I too came from people who loved and cared for me. Remember that we are part of a chain that goes back generations, centuries, millennia. Remember where you came from. Don't forget me. Don't forget I loved you. But there is yet another subtext to "Don't forget me." Ultimately, don't forget I lived, and don't forget I died. That is, remember that life is finite. that our days are numbered is not a fact to be mourned. It is simply a fact. It is less important to know how many days we have than to know simply that our days are limited. So now we come to a different kind of question. Many years ago, I participated in a parlor game in which we were given questions of a moral nature and asked to respond. Of course, the questions became much more complex as we discussed as a group what the implications truly were. One question was, if you knew a nuclear bomb would drop in 7 days, what would you do? At first blush, some members of the group considered how to avoid the blast or protect themselves against a prolonged nuclear winter. Ultimately, however, we realized that nuclear bomb was a metaphor for the end of life on the planet. So the question really was, if you knew life as we know it on Earth would end in 7 days, what would you do? And the responses, you might not be surprised to learn, started becoming much more introspective, vulnerable, honest. That group in the parlor game, parents, professionals, graduate students, all in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, had to be confronted with the notion of their own mortality in a very immediate way. That is what Yizkor does, what the plea, "Don't forget me," does. It reminds us that we do not have forever in which to move. Let's allow ourselves more than 7 days. I'd hate to have the world end during Zaman Simchatenu, the joyous festival of Sukkot, poo, poo, poo. But let's imagine that we knew that we only had 365 more days to live, that 5782 is our last year. Would we do anything differently? I think our first reaction is to say, of course, but just how would we change our lives? What would we do that we have not yet done? What would we no longer do? A record of our own mortality has a way of reordering our priorities. We all know of people who survive serious illness or a traumatic accident and who felt that they were being given a second chance, and who then responded with a dramatic change in their lifestyles. So I ask, what would you change? What would you make time for? What would suddenly become unimportant? I suspect these questions are a little discomforting because there's something about Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur that transcends the other Yizkor recitations of the year. Anthropologists will talk about the need to mark endings and beginnings. And we stand at the beginning of a Jewish New Year more aware than at other times of the passage of time. We read the Unatana Tokef and are reminded yet again of the unpredictability of life. Perhaps we do have only 365 days. Who among us really knows? Perhaps a recognition of our mortality contributes to our tears during Yizkor as much as the longing for our loved ones. As we recall our dear ones today, what all of us can share is the fact that they left us, as we will one day leave those who love us. It's not a fact to be mourned. It's simply a fact. So will those we leave behind here, don't forget me? And what will it mean to them? Don't forget me. Don't forget I existed. My being here has to make a difference. Now is the time to be sure that our lives have counted for something. Don't forget you are here because of me. I gave you life. My love sustained you in dark times. You know how to love because of me. Be sure our loved ones know how we care for them, in deed as well as in word. Our children and grandchildren learn how to love from watching us. I suffered, I endured, I harbored doubts, I also triumphed. You learned how to respond to life from me. How do we respond to life? Do we see pain as part of the nature of living, or do we curse our lot? Do we acknowledge the source of all good fortune, or do we take our blessings for granted? Are we teaching those around us how to respond? Don't forget what I tried to teach you. Don't forget what I stood for. Do our loved ones know what is truly important to us? Do we support the institutions we believe in? Jewish communal institutions, our synagogue, institutions that care for societies forgotten? Do we set examples by action of the importance of learning and caring? How will our loved ones know what we stood for? Don't forget we are part of an ancient chain. Remember where you came from. Have we done all that we can to teach that we are part of that chain? Do our loved ones know what it means to be part of the chain? Do they value it as much as we do? Don't forget I loved you. Don't forget to say it. If you wait too long, it might be day number 366. So we stand at Yizkor, and it is with the understanding that we stand between two generations, the one that we remember and the one that will remember us. As our loved ones may have cried, "Don't forget me," let us resolve to do all we can today and tomorrow, which will be today, so that we too will be remembered, and be remembered for good, for kindness, for love,